NATO is a name that may not be as popular as it should be, although it's played an important role in the development of nations since World War II. It was developed right after the implementation of the Marshall Plan in 1947-1948, which was essentially an economic recovery plan for Western Europe, and it linked Western Europe and made them somewhat dependent on the United States, who was the victor, along with Russia, the two major victors after World War II, and made up the two superpowers. In 1949, according to the Office of the World Historian, on April 1st, 1949, NATO was established and created, which its nation states, member states included the United States, Canada, most of Western Europe, and it formed as a strategic military alliance to counterbalance the rise of communism in Eastern Europe and across the globe. Russia had a counteraction to the strategic alliance with the Warsaw Pact in 1955 that included mostly Eastern European countries and satellite states that it extensively controlled versus the NATO, which was a collection of loose alliances that still had regional autonomy. NATO essentially has had three eras, with a newly approaching era just happening recently. The first era, as we can see, is the emergence of existence after World War II and as a counterbalance to communism. We see this with engagements in Korea, which it largely headed and was actually a NATO-enforced engagement, as opposed to Vietnam, which was mostly a United States engagement. But it showed itself throughout the 50s to the late 1980s as being engaged in countering communism. However, its role changed in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall, which saw a weakening of Soviet control in Eastern Germany and essentially recalibration of world powers and world power in Europe. According to Foreign Affairs, Mary Elise Surratt, there was some background deals between the U.S., NATO, and Russia, which Russia believed that the U.S. had guaranteed that it would not expand into Eastern Europe and even into Eastern Germany after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the agreement to loosen travel restrictions and Russian governance in the area. However, there was never anything officially signed or stated by the U.S. or NATO about expansion further. However, this will become one of the sticking points and one of the threats that Russia sees continuing into the second era of NATO, which is enlargement. In the 1990s, NATO continued to enlarge its member states with the acceptance of new states from Eastern Europe, including Poland, Czechoslovakia, and attempts for more Eastern European states, such as Georgia and the Ukraine. However, those still face major barriers between NATO and Russia to getting in. And we generally just see an enlargement from the Clinton to the Bush era of just a general enlargement and a bigger role for NATO beyond the central task of counterbalancing communism and communist expansion. And although Russia is not necessarily seen as a threat, Russia sees NATO enlargement definitely as a threat to their regional authority in Eastern Europe and just their borders, Russian borders along the Ukraine and Georgian borders. And this leads us to our final and current era of NATO, which is NATO skepticism and general discontent with the current NATO enlargement process. As we can see, even within the current U.S. administration, Trump has pressured current NATO members to spend more money to 2% of their GDP of their defense to NATO. This has caused some unease about Europeans and U.S. dedication to upholding alliances and European interest in retaining in NATO. This has gone so far to even pressure current French President Macron, who just recently announced his call for a united European army, which goes in direct directly against NATO's role and kind of forces somewhat of a renegotiation and looking perspective at NATO's role in Europe and the globe as more leaders and even a major part of the U.S. administration to look at NATO's current role in Europe and the globe. Thank you.